Hey there, it's Jordan. It is Monday, April 4th. The year is 2022, and I am delighted to be joined by Ron Placone of The Ron Placone Show, a stand-up comedian, satirist, YouTube host, and frankly, one of the main independent outlets, journalists talking about the digital rights, net neutrality, among other things. So we're definitely going to talk about some of the shenanigans going on and really, really dangerous stuff going on the interweb. And by the way, Elon Musk now owns 9.2% of Twitter. So that's good for democracy too. How you doing, Ron?
Good, Jordan. Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everybody, the weekend was good. We got over 35 new Status Coup members, thanks to my reporting on Friday from the Amazon labor victory, which we're going to talk about that a little bit too. People might have not seen my reporting on the ground for over a year outside the warehouse. Luckily, more people saw it on Friday. So we got a lot of member signups. So welcome if some of you watching are new members. And for those that aren't, consider signing up, statuscoup.com/join. $5 to $10 a month. You could support our on the ground reporting. And we're going to have our members call, I think, Thursday night. So Thursday night, it will be around 7 o'clock Eastern. So we'll let you know about that as the week goes on. But the members call is through Zoom. You don't have to put your camera on if you're shy. You could just listen. But it's always a lot of fun. I hope all our new members will join. You'll get an email link if you just signed up. So, Ron, I want to start, if you'll allow me the vanity of going through my exchange with MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi, Velshi, I think so, on the Twitter. It wasn't like a knockout, drag-out fight, but, you know, we went back and forth a little bit. I actually appreciate his response to me. He's been reporting in Ukraine, which honestly is still a very bad situation for the Ukrainians. I want to read, just before we get to my exchange with him, just want to read this for the Washington Post. World leaders on Sunday condemned the killing of civilians in a suburb of the Ukrainian capital, calling for new sanctions and investigations of alleged war crimes as outrage grew. Russian forces withdrawal from the Kiev region, which a NATO leader framed Sunday as a chance for Moscow to regroup rather than a true retreat, has further revealed the devastation wrought by the Russian invasion. Video verified by the Washington Post showed bodies on the streets in Bucha, a suburb northwest of Kiev, while journalists with the Post and other news organizations found some corpses whose hands had been bound. Ukraine's prosecutors general said a task force has found more than 400 bodies of civilians in the Kiev region. Personally, Ron, I take everything kind of with a grain of salt because there's propaganda on both sides. However, I don't think Ukrainian forces slaughtered Ukrainians in this case. So I do believe Russia has been killing innocent civilians there. But all of this, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I assume you don't. It's a horrendous war. The Ukrainians have lost a lot of lives. Russian soldiers, a lot of Russian soldiers have died, more than I think Putin has expected to die. But all these things that are happening are now building up the chorus from subtly networks like MSNBC pushing for direct NATO and U.S. involvement to anchors now just directly calling for U.S. NATO involvement. Colin, if we could start, Ali Velshi, who's an MSNBC anchor, he tweeted, "The turning point for the West and NATO will come when the sun rises over Kyiv on Sunday and the war crimes against civilian non-combatants becomes visible to all. There's no more time for prevarication. If never again means anything, then this is the time to act." So there is kind of like the appetizer to the main meal. Aaron Mate responded, "How do you propose the West and NATO act? What are you calling for?" And he says straight up, direct military involvement. So
yeah, I like how we're all kind of patting him on the back for at least being honest. We're just like, well, he's being honest. He wants to instigate World War III. At least he's being honest about it.
Exactly. And you took the words out of my mouth because I tweeted, at least Ali Velshi is dropping the veil and openly stating what MSNBC has been pushing all along. So I'm I'm flattered he has the time on the ground in Ukraine to respond to me. But I had said this in response to a separate Twitter user. I think the U.S. has done a lot via weapons, intel, and troop deployment in neighboring countries. War is an awful thing, but World War III would be way worse than what we are seeing now. NATO, U.S. troops in Ukraine would start a world war with a major nuclear power. So Ali Velshi took a break from responding to others. He responded to me. A number of experts with whom I've spoken say that that conclusion may not be obvious. I love it. May not be obvious because physically defending Ukraine would not pose an existential threat to Russia. Feel free to watch my segments from this morning, all of which I've posted. I didn't have the chance to watch the segments just by choice. So I responded. He, meaning Putin, has consistently said NATO on his doorstep is a number one concern. I think your experts are fairly reckless to basically say, trust us that the U.S. and NATO in Ukraine won't pose existential threat when that is what Putin has consistently pounded for years. I followed up. There's also a lot of experts who spoke of weapons of mass destruction, arming Syrian rebels, which included al-Qaeda, sticking it out in Afghanistan, and on and on. I, for one, don't trust anyone so sure poking the bear of a nuclear power on its doorstep is worth the risk. And he responded, at least he has good manners. I hear you and appreciate your perspective. Ron, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically his way of being like, yeah, I don't want to engage this any further. I mean, it was a polite response. Okay. This is one of those things where people like, like basically anyone in the corporate media. I mean, we don't even have to single out Ali Velshi, but they have a very, very rigid perspective and a very, very rigid frame of conversation. And that frame of conversation is Putin's a bad man. This was entirely unprovoked. And if anyone says anything critical of U.S. imperialism or NATO imperialism or neo-Nazis in Ukraine or anything like that, it means you're fine with everything Russia is doing. And kind of like having that sort of tribal, pro-imperialist, pro-U.S. Warmongering perspective, that's an easy thing to do. And that's going to keep the gravy train of cable news, which gets a lot of its funding from weapons manufacturers. That's going to keep that rolling. What's a hard thing to do? Well, the hard thing is to do is the thing that you're doing, the thing that Aaron Mate's doing, the thing that I do, the thing that, other people try to do, where we recognize the complexity of the situation. I'm not okay with what Putin's doing. I'm not okay with that in any way, shape, or form. You know who else isn't okay with that? Just as a side note, a lot of the Russian people. There's a lot of anti-war protests going on in Russia right now. Corporate media is not going to show you that, are they? No, they're not, because that humanizes more of the folks involved with this, and they don't want that. But you know what I'm also not okay with? I'm not okay with U.S. imperialism. I'm not okay with the fact that the U.S. is using Ukraine as a pawn and has been instigating this for 8 years and counting. I'm not okay with that either. I'm not okay with armed neo-Nazis in Ukraine. I'm not okay with that. So it's like at the end of the day, there are no good guys in this scenario, except for, who the good guys are, Jordan? The people in Ukraine who are going through a lot of terrible things right now. And my heart goes out to them. The people in Russia who are protesting what their government is doing. The people from Russia in the United States that are facing a bunch of xenophobic nonsense because of all this stuff. Those are the good guys in this situation. Who are the bad guys in this situation? Well, the imperialists, whether they're U.S. imperialists, NATO imperialists, militants in Ukraine, or Putin himself. Recognizing the complexity of that situation, that's a lot harder than sort of picking a warmongering tribe like the corporate media will do and always has. Why? Because that's their gravy train, baby. When you turn on cable news and you see commercials for defense industries and stuff like that, why do you think that is? Do you think the average person is in a market for a new tank? No, they're not. They're buying favorable coverage. And it's been this way since at least the 60s. There's been study after study done on it. We don't have an anti-war media, at least not at the corporate level in the United States. You got to go to the indie world to find that stuff.
Right. And folks, smash the like button. Do it for Ron and his beautiful head of hair. Keep pressing that like button. Share this live stream. Oh, well, we're not live. I had to record earlier. Long story. I'm dog sitting. But smash that like button and share the stream. So I think everything you said is right. And the truth is, there's another component as far as the media. The media, I'm talking CNN, MSNBC, their ratings have been in collapse since Trump left the stage. Well, the war in Russia and Ukraine, even in periods where I don't want to say doldrums, because there's been constant attacks, but it's not as new. It's not as volatile every day. They've continued covering 24/7 because their ratings have gone up. And the majority of their audience, no disrespect to my older viewers, not every older person is, falls into this Cold War hysteria. A lot of MSNBC, CNN, definitely Fox News audience came up in their middle-aged years in the 1980s, Cold War hysteria. So they're glued to their TV because they have been indoctrinated. Again, Putin is absolutely brutally invading another country, killing innocents. I don't condone that. But at the same time, it's not wrong to point out that promises were made to Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed, and they have been completely, blatantly disregarded in regards to NATO expansion not moving eastward. But specifically on this, and Ali Velshi, he's not the worst of them. He's not, Dan Rather or Brian Williams faking his Iraq helicopter rides and whatever else.
He's dodging enemy fire right now. Brian Williams is
right.
He's out there right now with his new podcast, Dodging Enemy Fire. It's probably going to drop in a couple weeks. I'm excited.
Right. But I didn't have enough Twitter time to point out, like, hey, you know what other experts said to get involved? The generals who were literally trying to trick President John F. Kennedy into invading Cuba. And that's why the Bay of Pigs was so disastrous, because they left out that tiny detail to JFK. Oh, yeah, we're going to have American air support for this. So Kennedy fired, CIA Director Alan Dulles and others. But to me, the problem here is Ali Velshi, as a journalist, you're supposed to have a good bullshit detector. The experts you're interviewing have reason to want to escalate war with Russia. Some of them are on the board of directors of security firms, defense contractors. Others are truly simply think they're really, really smarter and for certain know that, oh no, Putin's bluffing. He would never use nuclear weapons. Well, there's been reports that from Putin experts that his behavior has changed and possibly his mental status. So it's just amazing to me. You didn't learn from the Iraq war. You didn't learn from Afghanistan. And you're quoting to me, MSNBC anchor, well, experts think it wouldn't necessarily, just protecting Ukraine wouldn't be deemed by Putin as a direct threat. I mean, how do you really believe that?
I don't know if they do, to tell you the truth, because I think it's like, yeah, you're saying, oh, they're allowed, they should have a good bullshit detector. You're absolutely 100% right. But, they're allowed to have a good bullshit detector when it's permissible. And it's not permissible when it comes to the agenda of U.S. warmongering and imperialism. You can just look at all the Pentagon budgets. You can look at the economy of war that we've been building for many years and counting. Smedley Butler wrote the book many, many years ago that war is a racket. So it's not okay to have the right bullshit detector on there. That's why everybody who got the Iraq war right got fired from positions in the corporate media, and everyone who got it brutally wrong faced no consequence whatsoever, or in other cases, they even got promotions, for crying out loud. That's a systemic thing. It's not like every single time they're like, we could trust them this time. Oh, wait, they fooled us again. It's a systemic thing. And I would argue it's very, very deliberate.
Right. And lastly on this, I mean, Ron, we're also got to remember, yes, right now we have to think first and foremost about the Ukrainian civilians who are just completely unnecessarily losing their lives. It's a shame. We'll be releasing footage that we got from a freelancer of wounded soldiers and things like that. But also, what about American soldiers? We're going to send American soldiers to Ukraine, which, I don't know, Russia is allies with Syria, with China, with other countries. that could make Iraq look like child's play if we send American soldiers, NATO soldiers to Ukraine, because a lot of these people didn't actually think Putin was going to invade Ukraine, or it would be a, quarter of Ukraine invasion or a half invasion. So to me, do we want, it's bad now, but they don't seem to understand that it could be a lot worse for American soldiers, who the Republicans and Democrats, frankly, pretend to care so much about, until they actually, soldiers speak out against their bullshit wars that have disabled them and things like that. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of concern about American soldiers coming from the so-called experts talking to MSNBC anchors.
Absolutely. There's no concern about that. And I want to add to that too. I've been saying for the past couple of months now, yeah, my heart goes out to what the people in Ukraine are going through big time. But you know what else? My heart also goes out to the people of Somalia, the people of Syria, the people of Yemen. These are all other victims of the U.S. war machines who have been bombed as of recent. So you really need to kind of keep your eye on the prize of what the big problem is and who the real bad guy is. And the bad guy is imperialism around the world. That doesn't mean Russia's an innocent actor. Of course they're not. But you know what? I'm not going to in any way downplay the U.S. involvement in this. And once again, we are the shining bad guy on the hill. We are the war machine because we have a by-the-book empire. Down to the whole thing of, guess what? People in the United States are facing a declining quality of life. We saw it in its most bare assessment recently, where Joe Biden said, hey, no more funding for COVID, no more funding for testing. We got to put money into the war machine, baby. What do you call that? You call that an empire. What happens to every empire in human history? It falls. We ain't going to be any different. And with the way we're behaving, it freaking needs to happen. It's up to us to determine how brutal or not brutal it's going to be, or at least to do everything we can.
Right. Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, we'll continue covering it, but to tell you the truth, I'm not trying to play the Jew card, because obviously I'm not like religious, but I learned about the Holocaust, this and that. Like, I do care about any genocide happening. I've covered what Ron is talking about, the blatant racism against Black Ukrainian refugees, foreign students who have been kicked off trains trying to leave Ukraine, the sudden concern, Ukrainian flags all over the suburbs. I didn't see Somalian flags. I didn't see Yemenis flags. I didn't see Afghani flags, Syrian flags. So we know what's up with that. So it's important to continue covering it. But at the end of the day, fool me once, shame on you. We can't let MSNBC anchors or any anchors talk casually. Just trust us. Putin won't.
It's going to be different this time.
Yeah, Putin won't view boots on the ground in Ukraine as anything other than defending Ukraine. Yeah. And by the way, that's wag the dog. We put troops on the ground in Ukraine. Let's be real. Why Biden is doing it? He's looking to November. So that's the deal. Moving on to another important story. Status Coup was on the ground for a year, covering the Amazon workers fighting for a union. We were there when it was not a sexy story. We were there when we knew it wouldn't go viral. We were there when this very platform owned by Google was suppressing any headline with Amazon. And I could promise you that was happening. But, Ron, I got to tell you, as a journalist, a lot of times you go around the country and I kind of feel cynical. I kind of feel hopeless because I'm covering stuff and there's very little victories and a lot of defeats. So for me, covering this victory on Friday really gave me a jolt and really reinvigorated me a little bit in terms of there actually is hope out there, because we know there's a lot of hosts and a lot of cynical people out there basically feeding to people, burn it all down. The system's too corrupt to change anything. I want to play one clip from my coverage on Friday. This is Brett Daniels, because I think he was one of the leading organizers and what he had to say about basically what people should take away from this.
Did twice while organizing. Just personally for you, what got you inspired to be a part of this? And did you actually think you guys could be victorious? Because it was really a David versus a couple of Goliaths.
Yeah, so it's all about the people, the power of the people. Literally seeing Chris, Derek, Gerald, and Jay, over 2 years ago now, fight for working class people, fight for health and safety conditions, speaking out against Amazon's corruption and not handling health and safety seriously during a pandemic where New York was the epicenter. And they weren't providing masks, weren't 6 foot social distancing, holding pizza parties and carnivals, not caring. And then still, yet 2 years later, on the last day of the vote, what do we get? Yet another COVID notification. They removed the mask mandate March 1st. They removed barriers months ago. They don't care about people's lives and health and safety. It's continuously shown that it's profit over people, and we're here to say that it's people over profit. All power to the people.
Love that guy. Before we get to the corporate media meltdown, what are your thoughts on what he said and the overall victory, which a lot of people I don't think expected?
Yeah, I echo your sentiments, man. Like I felt really, really good when it was all happening and seeing it all unfold, and also seeing Christian Smalls and other Amazon workers get opportunities on the corporate media and stuff like that. I know we're going to go to the meltdown soon, but it was still really cool to see, like, okay, it got so big they can't ignore it. This is a good thing. Whenever a movement gets so big that they can't ignore it, that means you're winning. Of course, they're going to try to trivialize it and marginalize it, and that's happening right now. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, but it does mean that we're winning. I compared it in a fun way. I'm an aging punk rocker here, and I kind of compared it. It reminds me when I was a kid in a band that I've been following for a couple years finally gets a little bit of mainstream success. Like they get played on the radio back when that was a thing that mattered, or they got played on MTV. It kind of feels like that, except this has a lot of more real world significance in comparison. But so yeah, I mean, it felt freaking great. And especially since, you guys were on the beat for a long time with this, and you guys were also on the beat for a long time with Bessemer. I covered that a lot on Get Your News On with Ron as well. So we know all the dirty tricks that Amazon pulls, down to they will coordinate with the city itself to get traffic lights removed so that people can't pass out union literature to their coworkers. So, we know what we're up against. And when you look at someone like Christian Smalls, who had gotten the spotlight, and of course, it wasn't just Christian Smalls. I mean, there was a big movement alongside him too. But, he had really gotten some spotlight. So they were going after him specifically, and they knew what they were up against in Staten Island. We know they pulled out every dirty trick in the book. But you know what? The people were too loud to be ignored. And it just goes to show you that, yes, when we really get together and we become too loud and too big for them to ignore us, we can get some power. And we're seeing it with Amazon around the country. We're seeing it. You know who else is scared shitless? Starbucks. They are so scared right now to the point where they brought Howard Schultz back in as CEO. Why? Is Howard a nice guy who everybody likes? No, he isn't. We all saw his freaking presidential campaign. Nobody likes that dude. But you know what he's been good at in the past? Ruining union efforts. So they got to get him back in there, because the other guy, he's had a couple losses.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think there's something to be said. One thing that's frustrated me over the years, not to be, protest splaining to protest movements, and there's been a ton of, successful protests, and it's for a day, and that's it. Everybody kind of goes back to their own thing, and yeah, they'll let you protest for a day, maybe two, maybe, the police will crack your heads in, but generally, the capitalist class will let you protest, but there's not a lot of follow-up from protests. There has not been a lot of organized protests around economics using boycotts, using organized strikes. I don't think you're going to get a general strike overnight, but you could start locally in hubs, whether it's Kroger's, local groceries, local big banking, this and that. What I think stands out about this, because I saw it, I don't even think in a year they missed one day. I think they were out there with that union tent every single day. A lot of times when I got there, it would just be Christian, because other organizers were inside work, and Christian obviously was fired. But it was that presence every single day through real bad heat, real frigid cold. I mean, I was there when it was pouring out. We were under the tent. But that presence every day, which then evolved to distributing food to workers every day, that matters because consistency matters. And I think the left, or whatever's left of the left, needs to realize, hey, this student debt protest going on today, which we're going to cover, why is it just a day? I know people are working and, everybody's busy, but we need things to last a while. That's why Occupy was successful when it was. Obviously, for different reasons, it flamed out, including Michael Bloomberg dispensing the police to, basically run through the whole encampment. But we need things that last, whether it's union drives, strikes, protests. We need things that last a while where the media cannot ignore it. So I think that's one of the lessons. And another lesson, this is history, but the very media that didn't cover it, not all, but a lot of them, are historically freaking out, I would say. Let's start with my favorite, Jim Cramer of CNBC fame. Boy, his takeaway from this is really, really inspiring.
We know that the union work rules are what everything is about. It's the same case with Starbucks, too. If you can't tell your employees when they work, then you're really not able to have much of an ability to be able to move product or move coffee. And I think that the unions will be in charge of time that you need to work. And that would be dreadful very dreadful for Andy Jassy.
And that's just a U.S. picture, right?
Yeah.
They got Europe to think about as well.
Look, one of the problems was, Starbucks does indeed have unionized places in the ones that they franchise. But if you can't control the work rules, no one wants to work certain shifts. So you can just say, listen, I'm not going to work that shift. And Amazon would not be able to say, yes, you must work it. So that's what at stake with union is time that you have to work.
Our thanks to Dee. We're going to watch developments in New York.
We have more on
and
the
Alabama.
tech check?
I imagine we will.
Because she's doing amazing work. This is a very important story because one of the reasons why Amazon works so well is because people work when Amazon.
So, yeah, that's the main fear that Amazon had, that, Christian Smalls will be setting the schedule for workers. Before I get your response, I want to play a clip that maybe Jim Cramer did not consider because, Amazon currently does set the schedule, including forcing people to work through tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, and other things. Colin, if we could play that clip.
Every year that I can remember that it was a snowstorm or a hurricane, we still had to come in to work if it was our assigned day. So, the fact that this time it took multiple workers' lives, it just shows how greedy this corporation is. They'll do anything they can to get a dollar bill, even if it involves sacrificing their own workers' lives. And it's just really sad to see. And it just really makes us motivated more, as ALU, to continue our fight and make sure that we win this union, because the fact that they have this no cell phone policy, really, it irks me, because a situation like that of a tornado, this poor worker just reaching out to his wife, just telling them, Amazon won't let me leave, and it's like almost a cry for help, and there was no alternative for him, and it's just so sad.
Yeah, I guess Jim Cramer forgot about that tornado or hurricanes, or another worker told me they lost their car driving to work during a blizzard. But they were going to get fired if they didn't go during a blizzard in New York City. Your thoughts on, we're not surprised by a CNBC meltdown, but this whole notion that, Amazon won't be able to set its schedules, this and that. Well,
it's beyond ridiculous. I mean, that is so beyond ridiculous to try to. It's almost like he sat down, which, by the way, small aside, he sounds drunk, but it's almost like he sat down and he's like, okay, I have to find some kind of reason why this is bad. I have to find some kind of spin to say why this is a terrible thing that workers will actually have to be treated with respect and dignity. What can I possibly do? And this is the best he came up with. He's like, oh, yeah, they'll set the schedule, so you won't get anything in 2 days anymore. That's not what a union does. That's not how a union works. A union is not there to say, hey, we only want to work 2 hours this week, so screw you. That's not how it works. That's not what happens. What happens is people are treated with respect and dignity. So when it comes to scheduling, a union is there to protect you if you have scheduled time off that you are entitled to as an employee, and Amazon comes at you and says, hey, you got to come in today because we had someone else call off, and if you don't, you're fired. And you say, well, gee, today's my wedding. I feel like you guys are being unreasonable jerks here. The union protects you from something like that happening. That's what a union's for. As we pointed out in this clip, a union is there to protect you, that you have rights when there is something like a natural disaster, i.e. a tornado or a blizzard, where your safety is at stake, that you're protected there, that you're not going to have to be forced into work. That's not setting the schedule or monopolizing a schedule. That's giving workers basic rights that they shouldn't even have to ask for. You shouldn't be asked to put your life on the line for Amazon. And a union is there to make sure that doesn't happen. Because guess what? It is happening because of this psychotic capitalist society that we live in. And by the way, I don't even like to refer to it as stages of capitalism, because this is what capitalism does every single freaking time it's tried. So that's why you need a union. And Jim Cramer's ridiculous assessment here is absolutely comical and beyond bizarre. And there's no way he actually believes that. That's probably why maybe he had to throw a few back before he did this segment. I can't say for sure. I'm just saying the dude sounds drunk. And it is absolute nonsense. The fact that things like these are parroted on a cable news network just shows you how beyond toxic the media structure in the United States is, where we've given news and information over to the corporations to just do whatever they want. That's why they're not news organizations, they're PR organizations. And in this case, they're doing pretzel logic PR to try to spread anti-union sentiments.
And also, by the way, a union does not dictate when people work, but might fight and win. Hey, the overnight workers at Amazon that have to work from like 10 at night to like 5 in the morning, yeah, they're going to get extra because they're working overnight. Sure. Hey, the people who have to take transportation and it takes 2 to 3 hours for them to get to the warehouse in Staten Island, which I spoke with several of them. They have to take ferry, bus, subway to get there. Yeah, Amazon's going to have to cover some of that significant expense. That's what a union is for. Hey, right. Pashawn Brown, who was a 38-year-old black woman who dropped dead after Amazon had her administering COVID nasal swabs on coworkers from 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. for months. Yeah, she would have been able to go to a union and say, hey, they're telling me I'm going to get bonus pay for COVID testing workers. And a union would be there to say, no, Amazon could hire nurses and doctors to do that, not untrained workers. And Amazon didn't give her N95 masks, gowns, shields, plexiglass, nada. That's what a union is for. Right. But it also gets better. You go from Jim Cramer, freaking out about Christian Smalls setting the schedule, to another, I think it was CNBC also. This was this guy's first question to Christian Smalls on his victory.
Started as a highly contentious relationship between you and Amazon to no small degree because people there belittled you, alienated you, thought they could win by making you the face of the union push, but you've won this round. So my question is on your strategy from here. Amazon's got a new CEO, right, since you started this. You are now a national figure in this new labor movement. What's your approach from here? To what degree do you think you can cooperate more with Amazon leadership, or to what degree do you think that's wise?
Well, they don't have no choice. You know, the revolution is here. That's what we just witnessed on Friday. We're going to organize buildings all across the nation. You know, in the last 72 hours, we've been contacted from workers all over the world. So they want to unionize. We're going to absolutely help them. We're going to get it done here in New York first. We have another election coming up in 3 weeks, so we're right back at the campaign, on the campaign trail. And once we're finished here in New York, we're going to spread just like the Starbucks movement is spreading across the nation.
So, Christian, it started off hostile. Yeah, maybe because they fired me for organizing for COVID safety and then called me inarticulate, i.e. they're racist. But what's amazing to me is they're basically asking the victims of insane union busting, daily mandatory union busting sessions, which some of these workers I spoke with sat in 10 to 12 of the same union busting sessions, victims of extreme heat in the warehouse, including workers fainting and being carted off on stretchers, victims of Amazon refusing to call ambulances for hurt workers. I mean, I could go on and on. His question to the victims of that, who are now the victors, when are you going to cooperate with Amazon? I mean, you just can't make it up.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't. And of course, all those things you mentioned, that wasn't going to be incorporated in the question. They're not going to ask Christian Smalls, hey, what really brought it to this point? They're going to try to make it out like, oh, this guy was just fired, so he's pretty angry. I mean, we get it. He was fired, and maybe they're being a little hard on workers. Shrug. They're really trying to downplay it. And this is, you can find, there's a media theorist named Todd Gitlin. I'm pretty sure he's still with us, actually. But he did this thing where he does like the chart of how the media tries to marginalize movements. And it's really the first step they do is they kind of trivialize it, which is exactly what is going on there in that kind of very, very, very skeletal leading question where it's just like, oh, well, you were just fired. You're just a guy who got fired. And then you just started this thing and it's connecting with people. But, you know, you're going to be able to cooperate with people, right? And shout out to Christian Smalls for not bucking, for not in any way going into the downplaying of that question and just sticking to it where it's like they don't have a freaking choice. That was the perfect answer in that moment. So I got to say, you know, to put a positive on it, shout out to him for not falling for the bait and for really sticking it to them in that question and using his airtime, you know, to the most.
Right. Absolutely. So the other thing about this is, you know, CNBC, I mean, elephant in the room, all its sponsors are union busting corporations. So it's just like, you know, I mean, honestly, CNBC, most of the people that watch it are financial, Wall Street, you know, it's not like it's the financial industry, but it's like, it's not even a conflict of interest. Like they are literally, you talk about PR, they are literally in partnership with Wall Street. So this is part of why a lot of financial people are, I don't want to say all, but a lot of them are just kind of like have this aristocratic mindset of, you know, oh, they're only focused on Amazon's quarterly profits and, you know, impressive growth. And, you know, we could get you a yoga mat in 30 seconds. But maybe they don't know about all this other stuff because CNBC is certainly not reporting it. I know people in my life that have worked at Amazon and they say most people have no idea what's going on at Amazon, even though sometimes there's reporting online. There's certainly not much on CNN, cable news, broadcast television. But to me, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer because we should celebrate, but don't get complacent, people. If you think this one victory means Amazon's going to kind of wave the white flag and say, all right, let's go to the collective bargaining. Let's go to the table, collectively bargain, and, you know, we'll operate a little bit differently. If other unions other warehouses try and unionize, they are going to step up their efforts dramatically. I could tell you that from my coverage. They've even talked about contesting this election. I think between these results, there's a warehouse right across the street from JFK 8 that just won. Their vote is in a few weeks. I think you might start seeing some of the organizers get fired, which Starbucks has been doing, which obviously would be a direct them telegraphing to the workers at the other warehouse, hey, you vote yes, this might be what happens. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The very people that were celebrating on Friday out there on Twitter, this and that, need to be just as vigilant and should be out there at the union tent because they're still going to be out there for the next few weeks trying to convince enough workers at the warehouse across the street. Don't think Amazon's just going to go quietly in the night. They are a cold-blooded killer of a corporation.
Oh, big time, man. I mean, Jeff Bezos himself, I mean, he will go out of his way to get like these random child credits that like someone at his level of wealth wouldn't need in a million years. He wouldn't even notice the amount. I think it was like $1,500 in some scenarios. So yeah, I mean, Amazon has demonstrated time and time again, to call back to Bessemer. If you want some examples of how they pull out every dirty trick in the frickin' book, just look back to that, placing a ballot box in a place that the labor board told you not to put it in. They're like, yeah, you really can't put it there. Having only your people have access to it, pummeling people with anti-union propaganda every frickin' day, intimidating workers that had a remotely pro-union question, stopping workers from passing out literature to their fellow employees by taking out traffic lights, which, by the way, might have also been a road hazard. I'm not sure because I was never there. But, I mean, they will go to every length to prohibit treating their workers better. And we all know this is stating the obvious, but I feel like it's worth restating for some people who might be newer to this beat. Amazon could treat their workers with respect and dignity, give them living wages, give them fair time off, treat them right, give them benefits, give them the equipment that they need, make the facilities air conditioned and whatever else is needed so that people aren't collapsing and taken out on stretchers. They could do all these things many times over. And guess what? Jeff Bezos would still be very, very rich. It would still be a very profitable company. The workers would just be treated with dignity. I mean, everything they're asking for. And again, I'm thrilled this is happening. I'm thrilled at what's happening, and I hope they get every demand met. But, the kind of sad part about all this that you can't help but fall back to, all these things workers across the country are asking for are things they shouldn't even have to ask for. These are things that should be guaranteed. These are things that should be a given, that you're treated right, that you're paid a fair wage for your labor. We shouldn't have to ask for these things, but it's gotten so corrupt that we have to. So you know what? We have to have these demands be met, and then we're going to be able to go even further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of demands, great segue, and smash that like button, share this live stream. By the way, also subscribe to Ron's YouTube channel. It's right behind him, youtube.com/Ron Placone. I know he has felt the suppression. We have felt the YouTube suppression. So make sure you subscribe. I think you do your show a couple times a week.
Yeah, I do an interview show once a week, and then I do a kind of a headline show once a week, typically on Thursdays, unless my road schedule makes it be otherwise. And that's kind of when I go through the headlines of the week. And kind of like what you said earlier, I have a heavy focus on stuff like digital rights, climate change, which I kind of see the connection between those two things, no pun intended, and a lot of labor issues. So those are kind of the things I harp on the most on Getting News On with Ron.
All things YouTube loves to share in their algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. All the super popular things that YouTube loves to share, and all the sexy attention grabbing headlines. Those are the things I focus on. Digital rights. I mean, that's just clickbait right there. That's just like, oh man, net neutrality. You can't stop the traffic, baby.
Right. Absolutely. There is a big protest that happened today in DC outside the Department of Education, where I believe over 50 groups, student debt groups, other types of activist groups were protesting for Joe Biden to use his pen and cancel student loan debt. The most obvious thing that if Democrats wanted to, I don't know, win elections this November, forget the morality of it, might want to do like popular things that would galvanize young people who many of them will not come out if Biden doesn't do that. Many of them came out begrudgingly for Biden just to get rid of Trump. Let's take a look at just some of the scenes from this protest today.
The pen and sign the executive order that we've already created for him. We made the job easy. All he has to do is pick up the pen. Look at the pen, Joe. Just a look at the pen. Just a look at the pen, Joe. Just a look at the pen. Say what? Just a look at the pen, Joe. Just a look. Hey, Uncle Joe.
Hey, Uncle Joe. What should Uncle Joe do with that pen?
He can sign student loans and cancel them. He
he could also sign for clemency. Let's be clear, this pen is very powerful.
We're going to make sure we get it to him.
Absolutely. Hey, Joe, here's your pen.
Hey, Joe. What you saying about Joe Biden using the pen?
Joe Biden can use that pen for a lot of stuff. He can use that pen just like he used it to enact the criminal laws that have incriminated folks in 1994, and he signed that in. He could do the same thing to undo a lot of the damage, harm, and a lot of the things that he has done prior to becoming president, right? He can undo a lot of that stuff. Starting with student loans and ending with clemency, he has the power through the stroke of a pen to make that happen. I think people need to understand just how important and powerful that is.
You're saying he doesn't need Joe Manchin for that?
No, he doesn't. He just needs that pen. That's it. Somebody give him a pen, get him in the Oval Office, and let him sign that executive order so we could be done with this. Because the next step after this is criminalization. They're going to criminalize student loans. That's the next step after this. Somebody else has already been arrested in 2015 for non-payment. So it's going to create a debtor's prison. So if we're not careful, we are going to slip right into a place where black and brown bodies will start to be criminalized over the non-payment of student loans. So I'm very happy that this is happening, and I'm here to talk about that so that people can understand what the next steps for. If we don't cancel this debt, the next steps is that it will be criminalized.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, very important. Again, no disrespect to these folks. I love what they're doing. If they're not out there tomorrow, we go back to the status quo. If there's not any economic component of this protest, calling for boycotts of donations to Democrats, calling for protest outside the White House, continual protest. I don't know how effective it's going to be because obviously Biden, I don't think it's just that he's corrupt. That's a big part. Obviously, his donors are heavily invested, a lot of them in Wall Street. How they remember, Ron, they did this house of cards, leveraging all these mortgages on top of each other, which were called like debt collateralized something. They're actually packaging student loans together too, like they did with the mortgages. But I also think it's because Biden is basically living like it's 1995 still. And, you made a commitment, you made a promise here, and you gotta earn your promises. Even though Biden,
I think 1995 is being generous. I mean, I think he's still living. I mean, he's still living in the 70s. He has no clue what it's like for young people, and he's made it very clear he does not care. I mean, I have no empathy. That was one of his most famous lines. That was his big message to young people. I have no empathy. You guys have your iPhones. What more do you want? Well, I mean, our economic circumstance has gotten worse and worse. I mean, just in the time that you and I have grown up, Jordan, I mean, it's really, even just within the millennial generation, it has gotten progressively worse. The one inspiring thing about all that is we got a new crop of young people coming up. I know you got to speak to a lot of them recently in Florida, but we got a new crop of young people coming up who are absolutely freaking inspirational, who despise capitalism, who want justice, who want opportunities, who want to do something about climate change. And I can't wait till they're in charge personally. I just hope it's not too late. I feel like as an elder millennial, I kind of want to trade our time and just give it to them. I'd be like, look, I'm looking around. I'm seeing Pete Buttigieg, Joe Kennedy. We'll just forfeit our time and give it straight to you guys. I think that's a better idea. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's just we're in a moment where something like student loan debt, it's not as kind of hard-nosed and direct as, okay, we're in a workplace, we demand better treatment, we're going to go on strike, we can threaten a strike. I mean, sure, people can threaten just not paying, but again, they can just start throwing people in jail, and Joe Biden especially would be happy to do that. So would Kamala Harris. So it's a much different societal demand in that regard, which makes building a movement a lot more difficult. It's not easy. It has to be done, but it's not easy. It's not easy for people to show up multiple days in a row. People have jobs. People have lives. People got to keep food on the table, and people got to look out for their families. And by the way, this is a systemic design. The United States designs it in a way where it's not easy to go on strike. Everything from not paying living wages to having health care tied to your job. They make sure that it's really hard for you to say enough is enough and I'm not going to take any more. So, when it comes to student loan debt, it's so ridiculous. This guy could just, with one signature, wipe out debt, bring generations out of crippling amounts of debt, not just millennials, but Gen Z members, Gen Xers in some degrees. So it would be huge. It would be huge. And it would be a huge economic shot in the arm because guess what? People would have more money to spend in the economy. And he could do it with a stroke of a pen. And what it would do politically, Jordan, I think it goes beyond November. I think if this happened and the Democratic Party really took it and ran with it, they would have the majority for years to come. So, but again, I don't think the Democrats' top priority is winning. I think their top priority is keeping the donor class happy. And the donor class certainly doesn't want this to happen. So it's a no-brainer from every situation you look at it. The only losers here are a couple of predatory loan profiteers who would still be rich at the end of the day anyway. It's a really small percentage of loan profiteers that are really benefiting from this stuff. When they make the argument like, oh, it would screw over all these people if you just forgive these debts. No, it wouldn't. It would just like take away a little bit from the people at the very top who don't need it anyway, but they're that freaking greedy. They're that freaking greedy that even though it would lift society up in a way that would be historic, quite frankly, they still don't want to do it because of the profits of the few. And those few control our politicians. They control our judges. They got it all in their pocket. And that's why Joe Biden won't do the bare minimum. And, I hate to harp on this, but I know it's very contrarian and edgy to make it out like, Bernie Sanders, blah, blah, blah. And look, there's a million things Bernie Sanders has done that have pissed me off. But I'll tell you what, if Bernie Sanders were president, there's a lot of executive orders he would have done that Joe Biden just freaking won't do. That's why for every time Bernie Sanders ticks me off, and there are many, believe me, there are many, I will not stop saying we would be infinitely better off if he were president right now. And this is one of the reasons why.
Well, also, I think there's another element, and this gets more into corrupt psychology. Let's say he does know that this would be successful politically. And I have to assume they're not stupid enough not to realize that. I'm sure polls clearly show them what this would do for them. I think because they are so bought and paid for, we live in the United Corporations of America, shout out to the flag, because they are so bought and paid for, they know that if they open the spigot and cancel student loan debt, that kind of galvanizes the forces. Wait a minute, we could do this, but not get Medicare for all. We could do this, but not get paid sick leave. Apparently we can do big things that help working class people. So it kind of gets rid of that, like how you're going to pay for it argument, or severely weakens the how you're going to pay for it if you give a dramatic, bold economic relief to, all people, but specifically Black people have taken it the most as far as student loans. I think they make up over half, maybe more, in terms of the proportion of who owes student loan debt. So I think that there is basically not wanting to open Pandora's box and give momentum to other causes if we cancel student loan debt.
Absolutely. Well, and it empowers generations of people, because now you're going to have generations of people. There's a lot of people who stay in jobs that they don't want to be in because of student loan debt. There's programs out there where it's like, oh, well, we'll forgive your loans, but in exchange, you have to be overworked and underpaid for 10 years plus. This would free a lot of people from those situations. And people would be like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to be treated right. I'm going to be given a wage that I deserve. I'm going to be given the benefits that I deserve. So it would empower people in that way too, on top of everything else you just said. And that's why there's the big resistance to do it. This is basically letting people know they don't have to take the diminishing quality of life. And that's why Joe Biden won't sign this executive order. One of the many reasons why he won't sign this executive order.
And the last thing, before we move on, do you know how much money big colleges give to both parties, but specifically the Democratic Party. I mean, Harvard and the Democratic Party are tied at the hip. A lot of former Obama officials, Clinton people, it's like a revolving door. They become professors at Harvard or Yale or one of these, Georgetown. Well, what is the college model these days? Insane tuition, and the only way a lot of people can go is student loans. So if you wipe out student loan debt for the people that have already gone to school, well, obviously there might be momentum for a follow-up policy, which is dramatically lowering tuition at these schools, or free public college, which Bernie obviously ran on. So that's another thing Biden's donors and Republicans' donors, to be clear, don't want.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I'm a former academic, so I have some experience with a lot of the corruption in that regard. And the thing is if we funded higher education properly in this country, which we could do many times over, then yeah, tuition could be free. Like that. That's a very attainable thing. I mean, other countries do it, and even for international students. I mean, I think a lot of people. I think you're going to see a wave real soon in this country, if it's not already starting. Where a lot of people are going to choose to get higher educations abroad because, even factoring in the travel costs and the tuition costs there, they're still significantly less than getting an education in the United States. So I think a lot of people are going to be like, screw this. I want to go spend some time in Paris or London or Italy anyway. Why not? So I think you're going to see a big wave of that. And it's really, higher education in the United States is in a disastrous place right now for a long slew of reasons that we don't have time to get into all of them right now. But if there's not a true systemic change, and of course, not everybody in academia is part of the corruption. Most people aren't. But if there's not a true systemic change, it's really going to go down the tubes big time.
Absolutely. And speaking of education, getting into your wheelhouse, I want to talk about this topic, which I didn't know about until you informed me about it, because there is a proposal out there, or a bill out there, that on the surface looks pretty good. But if you look underneath the hood of the car, it's not so good. It's called the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. Say that, JCPA. And, it kind of basically, I mean, you explain it, it really well.
Well, welcome to the world of digital rights policy, man. It's like, oh yeah, this sounds good. This sounds like a good, then you read into it, you're like, oh, this is terrible. I always say when it comes to digital rights, we're really governed by two types of people. People who either don't understand the internet, or people who can't handle the internet, i.e. Marjorie Taylor Greene. And you see acts like this. So what this bill does is it's supposed to be preserving, journalism and things like that by allowing media companies to cooperate with other platforms, to make sure that stuff is just kind of being distributed and that they're being treated fairly in terms of copyright and stuff like that. That sounds okay, right? But you read into the details and what qualifies a news organization, quote unquote, and what qualifies a platform. And basically what this bill really does, the nuts and bolts in it, and there's a lot of other fine details and they're all terrible too, but the cliff notes is it would allow organizations, it wouldn't allow Status Coup to have a seat at the table, by the way. It allows organizations like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, to basically literally collude with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, platforms like that. And it allows them to basically make deals that would supersede any antitrust laws, any laws in terms of fairness on the internet, anything like net neutrality, stuff like that. And it would allow them to say, this is how we want our traffic to be treated. So there could be a scenario where you might have to pay to share a certain link, or other news organizations might be amplified over others because of a deal they make with social media companies. That's disastrous. We could see a scenario where Status Coup is suppressed even more than it already frickin' is because CNN's paying a fee to Facebook that, by the way, even if Status Coup could afford to pay it, Status Coup wouldn't have the opportunity to pay it anyway. So this is a dangerous thing. And you got to ask yourself the timing. Why now? Well, gee, there's a good chance that once Gigi Sohn is finally approved at the FCC, which that's been a big circus we don't have time to go into anyway. She is a very qualified candidate, but they've been dragging their feet every way to Sunday on this. But once she is confirmed to the FCC, there will be a 3-2 pro net neutrality majority at the FCC, which means we're going to get net neutrality back federally on the books. We already have it in some states, including where I live in California, but we're going to get it back federally and on the books. So they're kind of looking down the road and they're thinking, gee, what are some ways that we can kind of get around this to kind of, give media companies and social media platforms a little bit of a leg up? Well, this is a way. Saying you're going to suspend antitrust in the name of journalism. It's anything but that. This is a disastrous bill. Amy Klobuchar is one of the architects of this one. And I don't know. She is notorious for being behind digital rights legislation that would be anything but, would actually be disastrous legislation if you actually read the fine print. She was behind the Safe Tech Act, which was a similar act. Sounds good on the surface. Then you look into the details and you see the disaster that it is. And I want to just harp on two other quick things here. I know the JCPA is the main conversation, but there's other things floating around too. One of them is the Earn It Act. This is Dianne Feinstein's one of the architects here. Now, that act is under the guise of
Dianne Feinstein's pushing bills. I thought she was like asleep in hearings and stuff.
She is pushing digital rights policy, my friend. Geez. Welcome to my nightmare. You have to know it too now. But and that bill is under the guise of protecting children, which of course, by the way, if you write into this, like if you sign, I've signed a lot of petitions against the bill, you get a totally gaslighting thing in return going, but we're trying to protect children online. That's what it's under the guise of. What it really does, Jordan, is it would threaten encryption, because it holds the companies accountable and platforms accountable. So it would basically end encryption in our messaging. That doesn't protect anyone. That makes everybody more vulnerable online, especially children, and especially, not to generalize here, but a lot of older people. This is not a good thing. It's actually a terrible piece of legislation when you read the fine print. But it's written in a way where people are just treating the internet as if it's a cable television network. Now, you also have the SMART Act, which is anything but smart. That's the extension of SOPA PIPA. If you remember that basically caused an internet blackout because of how disastrous it was. Basically, it allows the Library of Congress, in consultation with other government entities, to try to protect copyrights online. What does this lead to? Well, Jordan, you've been a victim of this yourself over here at Status Coup. Copyright in and of itself is a good thing. It protects intellectual property. I don't think many people argue that that's a good thing. But you know what goes alongside with copyright laws? Fair use laws, which means if something is for educational purposes, that is protected. If something is satire or commentary, that is protected, et cetera, et cetera. When you have some robotic algorithm making these determinations, you're setting it up for disaster. That's why Status Coup will get copyright strikes from their own freaking material. When you have situations like this where you don't have people who actually understand context reviewing these situations. So this would lead to another disaster. So when you add up the Earn It Act, the SMART Act, the JCPA that allows big news organizations to collude with social media platforms, and the biggest ones of them, what are you setting up here? You're setting up a disaster that would just gut the internet as we know it. And I know that's hard to imagine, but you know what? At the end of the day, the internet is just another platform. They can get a hold of it. They can gut it, and it would make things like this a thing of the past.
Right. And by the way, and hopefully YouTube's not listening to this. What you're describing has already kind of happened. A lot of people don't realize, YouTube changed its algorithm, kind of a overreaction to an advertiser freak out a couple years ago, but it also correlated with YouTube TV. YouTube TV was YouTube trying to basically become cable on the internet and get people to get rid of their cable and get YouTube TV. They were not doing well, so they jacked up the prices. I don't know how they're doing now, but I don't know if you have to have deals with CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and these others to carry them on YouTube TV. You might want to grease the skids a little bit for those networks on YouTube.
And what's their competition?
Right. Us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's already direct corruption. And there's also another problem with government officials basically dictating who is and who is not news, because these government officials, there's a reason they don't talk to independent media, because we don't depend on them. We don't depend on access to them for our content or our reporting or commentary or whatever. So they're always going to provide favorable legislation. Bill Clinton, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, for their PR people at CNN and MSNBC. So what you're talking about is making an already existing corrupt structure even worse.
Oh, big time, man. And look, it's one of those things, kind of like you said earlier, too. These aren't the world's sexiest topics. They don't generate tons of clicks. You know, I wrote a piece once on net neutrality. The outlet I wrote it for wrote me back, and they said net neutrality is just not that interesting. Guess what happened about 6 months later? We frickin' lost net neutrality. I bet that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 in the year 1996 wasn't a sexy topic either. In fact, I'm sure it wasn't. But it led to a frickin' disaster. And maybe if more people were sounding the alarm, it wouldn't have led to that disaster because it would have been stopped. So, you know, I'm going to sound the alarm. And I'm really thankful that there's some digital rights organizations out there, Fight for the Future. By the way, if you're interested in more on any of these pieces of legislation, go to fightforthefuture.org or freepress.net. Those are good places to start to learn more. I'm glad there's people sounding the alarm on this that won't stop sounding it, because even though a lot of these things are written in a confusing way so that the general person isn't really staying abreast as to what they would actually do and how they would really have a negative impact on your life. They like it that way. They want you to be, oh yeah, the Internet Act, that just helps protect kids online. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do anything like that. They want you to just passively accept these things. So, but we're not going to.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're covering it. And by the way, not to blow smoke up your ass, to the viewers watching, there's certain types of people out there that cover things with really no benefit to them. I mean, what Ron is talking about, he's not like making huge profit off of these topics. If anything, he's screwing himself. My coverage of Amazon at the warehouse for a year, maybe we got like 200, 300 live viewers at the most. Not because people aren't interested, but YouTube literally, I mean, we could show you with notifications, does not notify people. My Flint coverage, literally the last big story I broke on Flint, the video we did on it, no notifications went out. I wonder why. So kudos to you for covering these things, because it would be a lot more beneficial for you to like just put Joe Rogan in a headline 24/7 and, you know, call it a day. So
yeah, but you know what, man, then I'd get really bored. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, but it's like, these are the topics I'm interested in. So, you know, I'm just going to talk about what interests me and just hope that there's enough digital rights nerds out there to help me be able to still do my thing. So,
and real quick segue, another important digital topic. If the internet wasn't bad enough, Elon Musk has now purchased a 9.2% stake in Twitter after he hinted at a shakeup of Twitter. And he is now the largest individual shareholder of Twitter. Jack Dorsey, former CEO, is now, I think, at 2%. So Elon Musk, you know, infamous for union busting, horrible working conditions at Tesla, really weird social interactions and public appearances.
Cringe takes on Twitter all the frickin' time.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude's Twitter is like, oh, but really, dude, you said that? How? What? Oh, God.
Yeah.
So I guess those will all be amplified even more.
I mean, I don't really know any silver lining in Elon Musk. I mean, obviously, him being the largest investor is going to play a part in day-to-day activities. I can't think of anything good about it other than he's really anti-government. So maybe he would be against, you know, well, no, he'd be more against government regulation of big tech. So no, that's a bad thing. What are your thoughts?
He would side with big tech, and it's one of those things. I mean, really what we need is kind of like antitrust legislation that breaks up some of these monopolistic companies. And I think we need a straight up digital bill of rights. I know that's a huge ask, but hey, I think it's time. And yeah, I can't picture him, going for anything remotely like that. He's probably one of those people where it's like, yeah, maybe occasionally he'll be a strange bedfellow for something like maybe net neutrality or something like that. But I think more often than not, he would just, have a terrible take on something. And a lot of times on these things too, you hear people spouting off on legislation that they didn't actually bother reading. And it's not all that hard. It's just like, like Section 230 is not a super complicated document. It's just right there and you can just kind of read it. It takes like 10 minutes. But yeah, I think Elon Musk having this share in Twitter will not be anything remotely close to a good thing. I feel like we're going to reach a point where there's just going to be two just streaming service / empire / servers / everything that has to do with any type of e-commerce. And it's either going to be the Musk mansion or the Bezos bucks. And those are your two choices. And basically they're going to be the same choice, really.
Right. Absolutely. For me as a journalist, Twitter is one of the bigger platforms to get stories seen, interviews seen, clips seen, this and that. But, Twitter has been definitely moving more towards censorship, towards safe spaces, like, flagging for you, like this might be a troublesome topic. Do you want to click on this? It might, be a little much for you. I don't see how the richest people on earth basically buying up big tech. That is a huge encroachment on us because make no mistake, another topic that's not sexy but important, we're fighting an information war and we're losing.
Yeah.
We're fighting an information war and we're losing.
Well, and what you said, like whenever like the richest of the rich get involved, it has a 0% success rate. We go back to what happened with MySpace when they took it out of Tom's hands and put it into Fox News and whoever else eventually owned that. They freaking ruined it, which by the way, I do miss MySpace. I feel like that was the best of all the social media platforms and it just got ruined for us, which is a bummer. But, we see what happened with Facebook when it's just Mark Zuckerberg's wet dream. And we're seeing what's happening with Twitter. It's getting worse. So these things have a 0% success rate. So it's going to be one of those things too. It'll be a scary moment when there's nowhere else for us to go because there's legislation out there that will stop any future social media venture from happening or being successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Ron, if you'll indulge me as I wrap up, I just want to show, and then we're going to promote all your stuff coming up. We did a poll over the weekend, Colin, if you have the results. We did a poll because there seems to be an issue with people being notified when we're live, if you can keep the results up. So we asked Status Coup subscribers, do you receive notifications from YouTube when we post videos or go live? 20% said yes, exclamation point. I click the bell and YouTube notifies me on every post. A lot higher than I thought. 36%, sometimes I'm subscribed and received some notifications. 12%, sometimes I click the bell but don't get every notification. No, I'm a subscriber, but I don't get any notifications. 29%. 29%. So rounded to 30. Don't get any notifications. And Colin, if you could put it back up, this one is even more troublesome to me. Sometimes I click the bell, but I don't get every notification. Well, that's the point of clicking the bell. If you've clicked all notifications, you should be getting every notification. So between 29%, 12%, what is that? 41% are either not getting any notifications or even though they click the bell, don't get every notification. I wonder why. Why. Ron.
Honestly, I bet you that I bet you there's a little bit of a thing to it where I bet at least some of those 12% were unsubscribed. That would have been an interesting thing to put in that poll too, where it's just like, oh, I just found out I'm unsubscribed. Like have that. The guy who helps me with my thumbnails and with some editing over on Get Your News On with Ron, my buddy Joe, he texted me the other day and he was like, I was unsubscribed to the channel 3 times this week. And he's literally one of the people who helps with the channel. And he was unsubscribed 3 times in 1 week. So it's like they're unsubscribing people. And then they go like, oh, well, if your account's like not active a certain amount, we just unsubscribe people. And we think that people might not want to get notified all the time. I mean, it'd be like if you subscribe to a magazine and they're not sending you every issue, like, oh, we didn't think you wanted all of them. You just subscribed for your health. Like, so it's absolutely ridiculous what they do.
Absolutely. And you want to know something? Tell you the truth, not good for me to say this on YouTube, but this is an information war that Google, YouTube owned by Google, is fighting. Because I got news for you. If you click all notifications for CNN, they'll send you every damn one. They'll tell you when Wolf Blitzer's going to the bathroom. Okay. So this is a way to hide information from you. I literally have moderators on my channel, people who moderate in the chat who don't get notifications and stumble in just because they looked like 20 minutes into the live stream. This is particularly bad, Ron, for an outlet that goes on the ground. We were just on the ground in Florida covering the Don't Say Gay bill, which is a disaster and really, really horrible what DeSantis is doing and Republicans are doing there. I was going live to 100 people and I have 127,000 subscribers. So we looked after, there were some things, the war, obviously that week was the Supreme Court hearings, but there was also a notification issue. So it's kind of like, how could you call it YouTube, if it's really FewTube?
Yeah.
For the few. I've been calling it FewTube forever because that's what it is. And it's not right to the viewers. If you want to somewhat favor trusted news, I'm against that. But there's favoring authoritative news, which they include Fox News in there, by the way, YouTube has said. And then there's hiding other news. And that's basically what they're doing. And it's not right. And talking about protests, frankly, I think independent media, whether you like everybody likes each other or not, should be coming together because it's only getting worse every year, and it's going to even start affecting more the bigger channels who already had.
I agree. I mean, if we can't agree on just basic digital rights things that make what we do possible, I mean, man, that's pretty bad. It's like we should at least be able to come together on that. It's just like, gee, man, if we don't preserve a free and open internet, what do we got? Right.
Absolutely. Ron, please tell us where we could find you on stage with your comedy tours.
Yeah, I'm going to be hitting the road soon. I'll plug some tour dates. I leave in a couple weeks, actually. I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Burlington, Vermont, Portland, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City. I hope you can make it out, Jordan. And you can get tickets for all those shows right now at ronplacone.com. I'm going to be hitting the road. The run starts April 16th in Pittsburgh, and it concludes April 25th in New York City. Lauren Ashcraft is going to be opening the shows in Pittsburgh and New York. Chris Moen is going to be opening all shows, and Jill Stein is going to be joining me for a tune in Boston, Massachusetts. So got some fun special guests, and there will be some more people as well, I'm sure. So you can get tickets for all those shows at ronplacone.com. You can subscribe to me on YouTube at youtube.com/ronplacone. I'm also on Rockfin, Ron Placone, Twitter at Ron Placone, and hope to see you out there.
And I look forward to coming to the show in New York City, and I promise not to slap you on stage.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a thing now. So
Jesus, I don't know, man. I don't know. I didn't really cover it, but it's just crazy to me.
I talked about it. You lost your comedian badge if you didn't talk about it at least once. So I talked about it once, and then I've been asked about it, I think no less than 1 million times, and I've just given my take on it. So
right, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of a sad commentary because I don't think there was one mention at the Oscars. I watched most of it of Don't Look Up and how it was, I think, the number 2 most successful show or movie on Netflix ever, or the climate crisis period. But there was obviously, God knows how many hours of coverage on the slap.
They talked about it nonstop, man. I mean, it was just like, I mean, of course I tweeted about it when it happened because I wasn't watching the show. So I thought at first it might have been like fake, you know, like I was like, is that real? And then I kind of looked into it more. You know, so I kind of gave my take on it. You know, I thought Judah Friedlander had a really brilliant take on it. So I retweeted him, and Kathy Griffin, actually, I agreed with her take on it. So I retweeted her. And then I kind of said my piece, and that was it. But I mean, some people, they just kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it and drawing all these points of connection where it just got to the point where it's just like, okay, we get it. We get it. Let's move on now. Let's move on.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ron, for taking the time. I'm glad we should do this more often. Everybody subscribe, youtube.com/Ron Placone. Check out his shows on his website, and we will see you guys tomorrow. By the way, we're going to do our members only call, on Thursday nights, 7 o'clock Eastern. So definitely, if you're a new member, because we got a bunch of signups over the weekend after my Amazon reporting, definitely you will get a link that also is for YouTube members and patrons. It's through Zoom. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Definitely kind of laid back. I probably share too many details that I don't share on the public YouTube streams. So kind of a thing we do to thank the members every month. So that's going to be Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern. And I'll see you guys here tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern. Have a good day.